Wife discovers husband's double life through a restaurant menu. Her shocking reaction with tomato sauce stuns both families. Hello, welcome, leave a like, subscribe, activate notifications, and enjoy the story. Imagine finding a seemingly ordinary item that unravels the biggest secret of your life. Laura's world shatters when she stumbles upon an elegant restaurant menu in her husband's bag, revealing a hidden world she never knew existed. What begins as a simple discovery quickly spirals into a heart-wrenching journey of betrayal and deceit. In this emotional roller coaster, every detail matters, and every decision is crucial. Laura's search for the truth leads her into a storm of family conflicts and shocking revelations that will leave you on the edge of your seat. Can she confront the reality of her husband's double life before it's too late? Brace yourself for a story filled with raw emotion and unexpected twists that will keep you hooked until the very end. The sound of shattering glass pierced the tranquil suburban evening as Laura Pearson's trembling hands lost their grip on her favorite mug. She stood frozen in her pristine kitchen, staring at the crumpled piece of paper that had fallen from her husband Mark's briefcase. It wasn't the menu's elegant cursive font or the mouth-watering descriptions of exquisite dishes that made her blood run cold. It was the handwritten note scrawled hastily on the back. "Can't wait to see you again, my love. Same time, same place. E." Laura's mind reeled as she tried to process what she was seeing. Her husband of 15 years, the man she thought she knew better than anyone else in the world, was leading a double life. The weight of this realization crashed down upon her, threatening to crush her very soul. With shaking fingers, she picked up the menu, her eyes darting across the page. "Le Petit Jardin," she read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. In all their years together, Mark had never once mentioned this restaurant. It was clear why. This wasn't just any dining establishment. The prices alone spoke volumes about its exclusivity, each dish costing more than their monthly mortgage payment. Laura's thoughts raced, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure the neighbors could hear it. She glanced at the clock, 7:15 p.m. Mark had left for a late meeting just 30 minutes ago. Without thinking, she grabbed her keys and bolted for the door, leaving the broken mug and spilled coffee forgotten on the kitchen floor. The drive to downtown Chicago was a blur. Laura's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Tears streamed down her face, smearing her carefully applied makeup. She couldn't shake the image of Mark with another woman, laughing, touching, sharing intimate moments that should have been reserved for her alone. As she navigated the busy streets of the Magnificent Mile, Laura's mind wandered to happier times. Their wedding day, full of promise and dreams of a future together. The day they brought home their daughter, Lily, now a vibrant 12-year-old who adored her father. How could Mark throw all of that away? And for what? Le Petit Jardin was tucked away on a quiet side street, its understated exterior belying the opulence within. Laura parked across the street, her heart racing as she watched the comings and goings of Chicago's elite. Women in designer dresses and men in tailored suits disappeared behind the heavy oak doors, emerging hours later with flushed cheeks and secretive smiles. Summoning every ounce of courage she possessed, Laura approached the restaurant. She peered through the window, her breath fogging the glass as she scanned the dimly lit interior. And then she saw him. Mark sat at a corner table, his back to the window. Across from him was a woman Laura had never seen before. She was stunning, tall, willowy, with cascading dark hair and piercing green eyes. The woman threw her head back in laughter at something Mark said, her hand reaching across the table to caress his. Laura felt as if she'd been punched in the gut. She stumbled backward, gasping for air. It was one thing to suspect, another entirely to witness the betrayal with her own eyes. As she turned to flee, her gaze fell upon a framed photograph near the entrance. It was a gallery of the restaurant's most esteemed patrons, and there, front and center, was a picture of Mark with his arm around the mystery woman. The world spun around her as Laura staggered back to her car. She collapsed into the driver's seat, her body racked with sobs. How long had this been going on? How many lies had Mark told? How many nights had he come home, kissed her cheek, and pretended everything was normal while carrying the weight of this secret. As the initial shock began to subside, anger bubbled up within Laura. She had given Mark everything: her youth, her love, her unwavering support. She had stood by him as he climbed the corporate ladder, sacrificing her own career ambitions to create a loving home for their family. And this was how he repaid her? Laura's hand hovered over her phone. Should she call him now, confront him with what she'd seen? Or should she bide her time, gather more evidence, and plan her next move carefully? The thought of facing Mark, of hearing his excuses and lies, made her physically ill. As she sat there, paralyzed by indecision, a tap on her window startled her. Laura looked up to see a concerned valet peering in at her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, his voice muffled through the glass. Laura forced a smile and nodded, quickly starting the car. As she pulled away from Le Petit Jardin, her mind raced with possibilities. Who was this woman? What did she have that Laura didn't? And most importantly, what was Laura going to do now? The drive home was a stark contrast to her frenzied journey into the city. Laura moved on autopilot, her thoughts a tangled mess of memories and questions. As she pulled into her driveway, she noticed the lights were on inside. Mark was home. For a moment, Laura sat in the darkness of her car, gathering her strength. She looked up at their house, with its manicured lawn and cheerful flower boxes. It had always been her sanctuary, a place of love and comfort. Now it felt like a facade, hiding ugly truths behind its picturesque exterior. Taking a deep breath, Laura made a decision. She wouldn't confront Mark tonight. No, she needed time to process, to plan. She would pretend everything was normal while she figured out her next move. After all, if Mark could lead a double life, so could she. With trembling hands, Laura reapplied her makeup, erasing all signs of her emotional turmoil. She plastered on a smile that didn't reach her eyes and stepped out of the car. As she walked towards the front door, she steeled herself for the performance of a lifetime. The door opened before she could reach for her keys. Mark stood there, his face a mask of concern. "Honey, where have you been? I've been worried sick." Laura looked into the eyes of the man she thought she knew and felt her heart shatter all over again. But her voice was steady as she replied, "Oh, I just needed to run a quick errand. Nothing to worry about, dear." As she stepped past him into the house, Laura's mind was already racing with plans. She would uncover the truth no matter the cost. And when she did, Mark would learn that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, especially one armed with a menu and a thirst for justice. Laura's world had been turned upside down, but outwardly, she maintained a facade of normalcy. Each morning, she'd kiss Mark goodbye as he left for work, her lips burning with the knowledge of his betrayal. Each night, she'd listen to his lies about late meetings and business dinners, her heart aching with every deceit. 2 weeks after discovering the damning menu, Laura decided it was time to dig deeper. She had spent sleepless nights planning, gathering courage, and steeling herself for what she might uncover. Today was the day she would follow Mark and confront the truth head-on. As Mark's car pulled out of the driveway, Laura waited a few moments before following in her own vehicle. She trailed him through the bustling streets of Chicago, her hands clammy on the steering wheel. The familiar route to his office suddenly veered off course, confirming her suspicions. He wasn't going to work at all. Mark's sleek black Audi came to a stop outside Le Petit Jardin. Laura's breath caught in her throat as she watched him exit the car, straightening his tie before entering the restaurant. She parked a block away, her mind racing. Should she go in? Confront him now? The weight of indecision paralyzed her. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, Laura mustered her courage. She stepped out of her car, smoothing down her simple sundress. She had deliberately chosen an outfit Mark had never seen before, hoping to blend in among the restaurant's well-heeled clientele. The maitre d' greeted her with a polite smile. "Do you have a reservation, madam?" Laura's heart raced. She hadn't thought this far ahead. "I'm meeting someone," she managed to stammer out. "They might already be here." The maitre d' nodded understanding. "Of course. Please, feel free to look around our dining area." With trembling legs, Laura made her way into the main dining room. The opulence of Le Petit Jardin struck her immediately: crystal chandeliers, fine art adorning the walls, the soft tinkling of piano music in the background. Under different circumstances, she might have been in awe. Now it all felt tainted. She scanned the room, her eyes finally landing on a familiar head of salt and pepper hair. Mark sat at a corner table, his back to her. Across from him was the woman from the photograph, even more stunning in person. Laura's stomach churned as she watched them, heads bent close in intimate conversation. Finding an empty table nearby, Laura sat down, her legs threatening to give out beneath her. A waiter approached, but she waved him away, her eyes never leaving the couple across the room. The woman, Evelyn, Laura had learned from her investigation, laughed at something Mark said, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. The casual intimacy of the gesture felt like a knife twisting in Laura's heart. She watched as Mark's face lit up in a way she hadn't seen in years, his eyes twinkling with admiration and, was it love? As if sensing her gaze, Mark suddenly turned. For a heart-stopping moment, their eyes met across the crowded restaurant. Laura saw the color drain from his face, his expression morphing from joy to shock to fear in rapid succession. Laura, Mark's voice carried across the room, drawing curious glances from nearby diners. Evelyn turned, her perfect brow furrowed in confusion. Mark, who is that? Laura stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The room seemed to spin around her as she approached their table, her legs moving of their own accord. "Hello, Mark," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" Mark's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Laura, this isn't, I can explain." Evelyn looked between them, realization dawning in her eyes. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're his wife." The confirmation hit Laura like a physical blow. She had known, of course, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "Yes," Laura said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm his wife, and you are." Evelyn stood, her chair toppling backward. "I'm so sorry," she said, gathering her things. "I had no idea. He told me. He said you were divorced." Laura felt as if she'd been doused in ice water. Divorced? The lie was so enormous, so all-encompassing, that she couldn't even begin to process it. "Wait, Evelyn," Mark pleaded, reaching for her arm. "Please, let me explain." But Evelyn was already retreating, her heels clicking rapidly against the polished floor as she fled the restaurant. Laura and Mark stood facing each other, the weight of 1,000 unspoken words hanging between them. The other diners pretended not to stare, but Laura could feel their eyes on her, could almost hear the whispers beginning to circulate. "How long?" Laura asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark's shoulders sagged. "Laura, please, not here. Let's go home and talk about this." "How long?" Each word was emphasized, dripping with the pain and betrayal of the past 2 weeks. Mark closed his eyes, defeat written across his face. "A year," he admitted. "It's been a year." The world tilted on its axis. A year, 12 months, 365 days of lies, deceit, and betrayal. Laura thought of all the moments they had shared during that time: family dinners, holidays, quiet nights at home. All of it had been a lie. Without a word, Laura turned and walked out of Le Petit Jardin. She could hear Mark calling after her, could feel the stares of the other patrons boring into her back, but she didn't stop. She walked out into the bright Chicago afternoon, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. As she reached her car, a hand grabbed her arm. She turned to find Mark, his face a mask of desperation. "Laura, please," he begged. "Let me explain. It's not what you think." She jerked her arm away, her eyes blazing with a fury she had never felt before. "Not what I think?" she hissed. "You've been living a double life for a year, Mark. A year. You told that woman we were divorced. What exactly am I supposed to think?" Mark ran a hand through his hair, his composed exterior crumbling. "It's complicated," he said, There are things you don't understand. Then help me understand, Laura shot back. Because right now, all I see is a liar and a cheat. As they stood there on the sidewalk, their private pain on public display, neither of them noticed the sleek black car pulling up beside them. The tinted window rolled down, revealing Evelyn's tear-stained face. I think, she said, her voice shaking, that we all need to talk. Laura looked from Evelyn to Mark, her mind reeling. She had come here seeking answers, but now she wasn't sure if she was ready for the truth. As she stood at this crossroads, Laura realized that whatever choice she made next would irreversibly change the course of her life forever. The tension in the Pearson living room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Laura sat rigidly on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to keep them from shaking. Across from her, Mark paced back and forth like a caged animal, his usual confident demeanor shattered. And there, perched uncomfortably in an armchair, was Evelyn, looking as out of place in the suburban home as a peacock in a henhouse. Well, Laura broke the silence, her voice sharp enough to make both Mark and Evelyn flinch. I'm waiting for this grand explanation that's supposed to make everything okay. Mark stopped pacing, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Laura, honey, you have to understand. Don't you dare honey me, Laura snapped, her eyes flashing with anger. You lost that right when you decided to lead a double life. Evelyn cleared her throat, drawing both of their attention. Perhaps I should start, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Mrs. Pearson, Laura, I want you to know that I never intended to hurt you. I truly believed Mark when he said you were divorced. Laura laughed bitterly. Well, that makes two of us who believed Mark's lies. She turned to her husband, eyes narrowing. Tell me, Mark, how exactly did you explain away our daughter? Or did you simply erase Lily from existence too? Mark's face crumpled, the weight of his deception finally seeming to hit him. I told Evelyn that Lily was from a previous marriage, that we shared custody. The room fell silent as Laura absorbed this new betrayal. She thought of Lily, their beautiful, innocent daughter, currently at a sleepover, blissfully unaware that her world was about to be turned upside down. The thought of her child being used as a pawn in Mark's elaborate lie made Laura's blood boil. You bastard, she whispered, tears pricking at her eyes. How could you? Evelyn leaned forward, her face a mask of confusion and growing horror. Mark, you told me your ex-wife was difficult, that she limited your time with Lily. You said that's why you could never introduce me to her. Mark collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I'm sorry, he mumbled. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Laura stood abruptly, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Then how far did you mean for it to go, Mark? How long were you planning to keep up this charade? Until Lily graduated? Until I conveniently died and made your lie a reality? No! Mark's head snapped up, his eyes wild. God, no, Laura. I love you. I love our family. I got in over my head. Evelyn stood as well, her composure finally cracking. Over your head? Mark, you've been lying to both of us for a year. You've been coming home to your wife and daughter while telling me you were building a future with me. Do you have any idea how twisted that is? As if on cue, the front door burst open, and Lily came bounding in, her sleepover bag slung over her shoulder. Mom! Dad! I'm home early. Sarah's mom had to... She stopped short, taking in the scene before her. What's going on? Who's that lady? The silence that followed was deafening. Laura felt as if she were watching the scene unfold from outside her body. She saw the confusion on Lily's face, the panic in Mark's eyes, the dawning realization in Evelyn's expression as she looked at the girl who was undeniably Mark's daughter. Lily, sweetie, Laura managed, her voice trembling. Why don't you go up to your room for a bit? Dad and I need to talk to our guest. Lily's eyes darted between the three adults, her young mind clearly sensing the tension. Is everything okay? Dad, why do you look so scared? Mark seemed to crumple in on himself, unable to meet his daughter's gaze. It was Evelyn who spoke, her voice soft and kind despite the turmoil evident on her face. "Hello, Lily. I'm a friend of your father's. We were just having a grown-up discussion. Your mom's right, why don't you head upstairs? I'm sure they'll explain everything later." Lily hesitated for a moment longer before nodding slowly. "Okay. But promise you'll tell me what's going on later?" She looked pleadingly at her mother. Laura felt her heart breaking all over again. "I promise, sweetheart. We'll talk soon." As Lily's footsteps faded up the stairs, the three adults stood in a triangle of betrayal and hurt. Laura turned to Mark, her voice low and dangerous. "You have exactly 5 minutes to explain yourself before I throw you out of this house and call a divorce lawyer." Mark took a deep, shuddering breath. "It started innocently enough," he began. "Evelyn and I met at a charity gala last year. We got to talking and there was just a connection. I told myself it was just a friendship, but deep down, I knew it was more." Evelyn interjected, her voice thick with emotion. "He was charming, attentive. He told me he was divorced, that his ex-wife made it difficult for him to move on. I fell for it hook, line, and sinker." Laura listened, her heart hardening with each word. The man she had loved, the father of her child, had woven an intricate web of lies that had ensnared not just her, but this other woman as well. As much as she wanted to hate Evelyn, Laura found herself feeling a twisted sense of kinship with her husband's mistress. They had both been deceived, both been made fools of by the man they trusted. A connection? Laura spat the words out. Was that connection worth destroying our family over, Mark? Was it worth lying to your daughter? To me? Mark looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and pleading. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I love you, Laura. I love Lily. But with Evelyn I felt alive, excited. It was like I was young again, free from responsibilities." "Free from responsibilities?" Laura's voice rose, her control finally snapping. "You have a wife, a daughter. Those aren't burdens you can just shrug off when they become inconvenient. Mark, they're commitments, promises. Or do wedding vows mean nothing to you?" Evelyn stood, her face a mix of disgust and resolve. "I think I've heard enough," she said quietly. "Mark, what we had, it was built on lies. All of it. I won't be a part of this anymore." As Evelyn moved towards the door, Mark lunged forward, grabbing her arm. "Evelyn, wait. Please, I can explain. I can make this right." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Laura, seeing red at Mark's desperate plea to his mistress, grabbed the nearest object, a glass vase filled with Mark's favorite orange roses. Without thinking, she hurled it at the pair by the door. The vase shattered against the wall, showering Mark and Evelyn with water, glass, and bright orange petals. They stood frozen, dripping and shocked, as Laura's scream of anguish and rage filled the room. "Get out!" she yelled, her voice hoarse. "Both of you, get out of my house." Evelyn didn't need to be told twice. She bolted for the door, pausing only briefly to look back at Laura. "I truly am sorry," she said softly, before disappearing into the night. Mark stood rooted to the spot, glass crunching under his feet as he turned to face his wife. "Laura, please," he begged. "Let me stay. Let me explain. We can work this out." Laura's laugh was hollow, devoid of any humor. "Work this out? There's nothing to work out, Mark. You made your choice. A year's worth of choices, actually. Now you get to live with the consequences." As if summoned by the commotion, Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, her eyes wide with fear. "Mom? Dad? What's happening? Why are you yelling?" The sight of her daughter snapped Laura back to reality. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "Lily, honey, go back to your room. Everything's going to be okay." But Lily was old enough to know that nothing about this situation was okay. She came down the stairs slowly, her gaze fixed on her father. "Dad, are you leaving us?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Mark looked from Lily to Laura, his face a mask of pain and regret. I don't know, sweetheart. That's up to your mom." Laura felt a surge of anger at Mark's cowardice, at his inability to take responsibility even now. But as she looked at Lily's tear-streaked face, she knew she had to be the strong one, for her daughter's sake. "Your father," Laura said, her voice surprisingly calm, "has made some very big mistakes, mistakes that have hurt our family deeply. Right now, he needs to leave so we can all think about what happens next." Lily's lower lip trembled. "But he'll come back, right? We'll still be a family?" Laura's heart shattered anew at the hope in her daughter's voice. She knelt down, pulling Lily into a tight embrace. "Oh, sweetie, family isn't just about living in the same house. No matter what happens, your dad and I will always love you. That will never change." Over Lily's shoulder, Laura met Mark's gaze. The unspoken message was clear. "Get out, now." Mark nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. He knelt down next to Laura and Lily, his voice choked with emotion. "Lily, my brave girl, I love you so much. I'm so sorry for hurting you and your mom. I promise, no matter what, I'll always be your dad." As Mark stood and walked towards the door, Laura felt a strange mix of emotions wash over her. Anger, betrayal, and heartbreak, yes, but also, surprisingly, a flicker of strength. She had survived this night. She would survive whatever came next. The door closed behind Mark with a soft click, leaving Laura and Lily alone in the wreckage of their former life. As they clung to each other, surrounded by broken glass and scattered rose petals, Laura made a silent vow. She would rebuild from this. For herself, and for Lily, she would find a way to create a new normal from the ashes of Mark's betrayal. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but as Laura held her daughter close, she knew one thing for certain. This was not the end of their story. It was merely the beginning of a new chapter. The days following Mark's dramatic exit blurred together for Laura, a haze of sleepless nights and tear-filled conversations. She felt as though she were walking through quicksand, each step a monumental effort. The weight of her new reality pressed down on her, threatening to suffocate her at every turn. It was a crisp Saturday morning when Laura finally ventured out of the house, Lily in tow, to face the world that had continued spinning while hers had come to a screeching halt. They were headed to Millennium Park, a place that had once been filled with happy family memories, but now felt like a minefield of potential triggers. As they walked along the winding paths, Laura couldn't help but notice the pitying glances and hushed whispers that seemed to follow them. News of Mark's infidelity had spread through their social circle like wildfire, leaving Laura feeling exposed and vulnerable. "Mom!" Lily's voice cut through Laura's spiraling thoughts. "Can we get ice cream?" Laura looked down at her daughter, forcing a smile. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's head over to the stand." As they approached the ice cream vendor, a familiar voice called out, "Laura? Laura Pearson." Laura turned to see Sarah Thompson, one of the room mothers from Lily's school, approaching with a sympathetic smile. "Oh, Laura, I'm so glad I ran into you. How are you holding up?" The concern in Sarah's voice was genuine, but Laura felt her defenses rising. She was tired of being treated like a fragile object, ready to shatter at any moment. "We're managing, Sarah. Thank you for asking," Laura replied, her tone polite but distant. Sarah nodded, her eyes darting between Laura and Lily. "Listen, I don't mean to pry, but I heard about what happened with Mark. If you need anything, someone to talk to, help with Lily, please don't hesitate to ask." Laura felt a surge of emotions. Gratitude for the offer, embarrassment at needing help, anger at Mark for putting her in this position. But before she could respond, Lily spoke up. "What do you mean, what happened with Dad?" Lily asked, her ice cream forgotten. "Mom said he made a mistake and needed time to think." "Is there more?" Laura felt the blood drain from her face. She had been so careful about what she told Lily, trying to protect her from the harsh reality of Mark's betrayal. But now, faced with her daughter's direct question and Sarah's horrified expression, she realized she couldn't keep the truth hidden forever. "Oh, Lily, I'm so sorry," Sarah stammered, realizing her mistake. "I didn't mean to dash." "It's all right, Sarah," Laura interrupted, her voice tight. "Thank you for your concern. If you'll excuse us, I think Lily and I need to have a private conversation. As they walked away, leaving a flustered Sarah behind, Laura's mind raced. How could she explain this to Lily? How much should she reveal? They found a quiet bench overlooking the lake, the gentle lapping of the waves a stark contrast to the turmoil in Laura's heart. She took a deep breath, turning to face her daughter. Lily, sweetheart, there's something I need to tell you about why your father left. Laura began, her voice wavering slightly. It's complicated, and it might be hard to understand, but I promise to answer any questions you have as best I can. Lily nodded, her young face serious. Is it because Dad has a girlfriend? Laura felt as though she'd been punched in the gut. How did you know about that? Lily's eyes filled with tears. I heard you and Dad fighting that night, and I saw the lady who was in our house. She looked at Dad the way you used to. The simplicity of Lily's observation broke Laura's heart all over again. She pulled her daughter close, stroking her hair as Lily's tears soaked into her shirt. Yes, sweetie, your dad. He fell in love with someone else. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you anymore. This is between your dad and me, okay? It doesn't change how much we both love you. As Lily sobbed in her arms, Laura felt a strange mix of relief and dread. The truth was out now, raw and painful, but at least there were no more secrets between them. Their moment of vulnerability was interrupted by the harsh ring of Laura's phone. She glanced at the screen, her heart skipping a beat when she saw Mark's name. Lily, I need to take this call. Will you be okay for a minute? Lily nodded, wiping her eyes as Laura stepped away to answer the phone. What do you want, Mark? Laura's voice was cold, all the warmth she had shown Lily moments ago evaporating. Laura, please, I need to see you. There's more to this situation than you know. Things I couldn't explain that night. Laura felt a familiar anger rising. More lies, Mark? Haven't you done enough damage? No lies, I swear. Please just meet me. For Lily's sake, if not for ours. Laura glanced back at Lily, who was watching her with wide, worried eyes. She sighed heavily. Fine. Tomorrow, noon at Le Petit Jardin. You owe me that much at least. As she hung up, Laura wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. But deep down, she knew she needed answers. Not just for herself, but for Lily too. The next day, Laura found herself once again standing outside Le Petit Jardin, the scene of her world's unraveling. She steeled herself, pushing open the heavy oak doors. Mark was already there, seated at a table near the back. As Laura approached, she noticed he looked different, haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and a day's worth of stubble on his cheeks. Laura, thank you for coming, Mark said, standing as she reached the table. I know I don't deserve dash. Save it. Laura cut him off, sliding into her seat. You said you had something to tell me, so tell me. Mark nodded, taking a deep breath. What I'm about to tell you, it's going to change everything. Again. But I need you to listen to the whole story before you react. Can you do that? Laura felt a chill run down her spine at Mark's words. What could possibly be worse than what she already knew? As she looked into the eyes of the man she had once trusted completely, she nodded slowly, bracing herself for whatever bombshell was about to drop. All right, Mark, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm listening. The ambient chatter of Le Petit Jardin faded into a dull hum as Laura focused intently on Mark. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the glass of water before him, taking a long sip before speaking. Laura, he began, his voice low and strained. What I'm about to tell you, it's not just about me or us or even Evelyn. It's bigger than that. Much bigger. Laura felt her patience wearing thin. Just get to the point, Mark. He nodded, leaning in closer. Do you remember when I first started working for Global Tech Industries? The big promotion I got 2 years ago. Laura nodded, unsure where this was going. Of course she remembered. It had been a cause for celebration, a step up that had allowed them to move to a better neighborhood, to start saving for Lily's college fund. Well, Mark continued, that promotion, it came with strings attached, big, dangerous strings. He paused, glancing around nervously before continuing. Global Tech isn't just a tech company, Laura. They're involved in some seriously shady business. Money laundering, insider trading, even weapons dealing. Laura felt as though the floor had dropped out from under her. This couldn't be real. It had to be another one of Mark's lies. What are you talking about? You're a software engineer. For God's sake. Mark's laugh was hollow. That's what I thought too. But they needed someone with my skills to create programs that could hide their illegal activities. When I found out what was really going on, I wanted out. But they threatened me. Threatened you and Lily. Laura's mind reeled. This was too much, too unbelievable. So what does this have to do with Evelyn? Was she just a distraction from your criminal activities? Mark shook his head vehemently. No, Evelyn. She's an undercover FBI agent. She approached me at that gala, said she could help me if I agreed to gather evidence against Global Tech. Our affair was a cover, a way for us to meet without arousing suspicion. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Laura gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. You expect me to believe this? That you've been living a double life as some kind of corporate spy? I know it sounds crazy, Mark pleaded, reaching for her hand. Laura jerked away instinctively. But it's the truth. I couldn't tell you, couldn't risk putting you and Lily in danger. I thought I was protecting you. Laura's mind raced, piecing together the past year through this new lens. The late nights at the office, the secretive phone calls, the sudden influx of money. It all started to make a twisted kind of sense. Why now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you telling me this now? Mark's expression darkened. Because it's almost over. The FBI is planning to move on Global Tech soon. But someone at the company is getting suspicious. I think they might be onto me. As if on cue, a commotion erupted near the restaurant's entrance. Laura turned to see two men in dark suits pushing their way through the crowded dining room, their eyes scanning the tables intently. Mark's face drained of color. Oh God, they're here. Laura, you need to leave. Now. What? Mark, I don't understand, Dash. But Mark was already on his feet, pulling Laura up with him. There's no time. Go out through the kitchen. Don't go home. Take Lily and go to your sister's place in Michigan. I'll contact you when it's safe. Laura felt as though she were drowning, struggling to keep her head above the waves of revelations crashing over her. Mark, I can't just dash. Please, Laura. Mark's eyes were desperate, pleading. If you ever loved me, if you ever trusted me, do this now. For Lily's sake. The urgency in his voice, the fear in his eyes. It was all so real, so raw. Despite everything, Laura found herself nodding. Okay, she whispered, her heart pounding. But Mark, I swear to God, if this is another lie, Dash, it's not, he assured her, his voice cracking. I'm so sorry for everything. I love you, Laura. I always have. Before she could respond, Mark gave her a gentle push towards the kitchen doors. As she stumbled forward, she heard him call out to the men in suits, his voice loud and jovial, playing the part of the carefree businessman one last time. Laura burst through the kitchen doors, ignoring the startled looks from the staff as she raced towards the back exit. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear, confusion, and adrenaline. As she emerged into the alley behind Le Petit Jardin, the gravity of the situation hit her full force. Her entire world had been turned upside down, again. The man she had loved, hated, and now... what? Pitted? Feared for? She didn't know anymore. One thing was clear. She needed to get to Lily. Now, Laura ran to her car, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the keys. As she pulled out onto the busy Chicago street, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. I'm sorry for my part in all this. Mark was telling the truth. Keep Lily safe. Evelyn. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, sending Laura's mind reeling once again. As she sped towards Lily's school, Laura's thoughts raced faster than her car. How would she explain this to her daughter? How could they leave their entire lives behind based on this unbelievable story? But deep down, Laura knew she had no choice. The fear in Mark's eyes, the urgency in his voice, it had been real. Whatever mess he had gotten himself into, the danger was real too. As she pulled up to the school, Laura took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. With trembling hands, she dialed her sister's number. "Kate, it's Laura. I need your help. Lily and I need to come stay with you for a while. It's an emergency." As she spoke, Laura watched the school doors, waiting for Lily to emerge. Her daughter's life was about to change dramatically, all because of choices Mark had made. The unfairness of it all threatened to overwhelm her. But as Lily appeared, her backpack slung over her shoulder and a bright smile on her face as she spotted her mother's car, Laura felt a surge of determination. No matter what happened next, no matter what dangers they might face, she would protect her daughter. They would get through this together. The drive to Michigan was tense, filled with Lily's confused questions and Laura's evasive answers. As the Chicago skyline faded in the rearview mirror, Laura's mind raced, trying to process the whirlwind of revelations from the past few hours. "Mom, why are we going to Aunt Kate's? What about school? What about Dad?" Lily's voice was small, tinged with fear and uncertainty. Laura gripped the steering wheel tighter, forcing a reassuring smile. "It's just a little unexpected vacation, sweetie. Everything will be okay. I promise." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but what choice did she have? How could she explain to her 12-year-old daughter that their lives had been upended by corporate espionage and FBI investigations? As they crossed the state line into Michigan, Laura's phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "Evelyn, be careful. They're looking for you. Don't use credit cards. I'll be in touch." Laura's heart raced. Who was looking for them? Global Tech? The FBI? Both? She glanced at Lily, now dozing in the passenger seat, and felt a surge of protective instinct. Whatever was happening, she had to keep her daughter safe. They arrived at Kate's lakeside cabin just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the water. Kate rushed out to meet them, her face etched with worry. "Laura, what's going on? Your call scared me half to death." Laura hugged her sister tightly, feeling the first tears of the day finally spill over. "Kate, I don't even know where to begin." As Lily unpacked in the guest room, Laura poured out the whole unbelievable story to Kate over steaming mugs of coffee. Her sister listened in stunned silence, her eyes widening with each new revelation. "Jesus, Laura," Kate breathed when she had finished. It's like something out of a movie. What are you going to do?" Laura shook her head, feeling utterly lost. I don't know anything anymore. I need to keep Lily safe." Kate reached across the table, squeezing Laura's hand. "You're safe here. Both of you. We'll figure this out together." For the first time in days, Laura felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't alone in this. The next few days passed in a haze of tension and forced normalcy. Laura tried to make things feel like a vacation for Lily's sake, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, hunted. It was on the fourth day that everything changed again. Laura was sitting on the porch, watching Lily skip stones across the lake, when a black SUV pulled up the gravel driveway. Her heart leapt into her throat as two men in suits stepped out, the same men she had seen at Le Petit Jardin. "Lily!" she called, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. "Come inside, honey. Now." As Lily ran towards the house, the men approached, their faces grim. "Mrs. Pearson?" one of them asked. "I'm Agent Thompson. This is Agent Rivera. We're with the FBI. We need to talk to you about your husband." Laura felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Is Mark okay?" The agents exchanged a look that made Laura's blood run cold. "Ma'am, perhaps we should discuss this inside." In a daze, Laura led them into the cabin. Kate took Lily upstairs, shooting Laura a worried glance as she went. "Mrs. Pearson," Agent Thompson began once they were seated, "I'm afraid we have some difficult news. Your husband, Mark Pearson, was found dead in his hotel room this morning." The words hit Laura like a physical blow. Dead? Mark was dead? Couldn't be true. Couldn't... How? She managed to choke out. It appears to be suicide, Agent Rivera said gently. But we have reason to believe it may have been staged. Laura's mind reeled, unable to process what she was hearing. I don't understand. Mark, he was working with you, wasn't he? With Agent Evelyn. The agents exchanged another loaded glance. Mrs. Pearson, Agent Thompson said carefully. There is no Agent Evelyn, at least not one working this case. The floor seemed to drop out from under Laura. But Mark said, we believe your husband was being manipulated by someone within Global Tech, Agent Rivera explained. Someone using the persona of an FBI agent to extract information. Information that could be very dangerous in the wrong hands. Laura felt as though she were drowning, gasping for air in a sea of lies and betrayal. Everything she thought she knew, everything Mark had told her. It had all been a lie, again. Mrs. Pearson. Agent Thompson leaned forward, his voice urgent. We need your help. Your husband may have left behind evidence that could bring down Global Tech and expose a massive conspiracy. But we need to find it before they do. Laura looked between the two agents, her mind spinning. Could she trust them? After everything that had happened, how could she trust anyone? But then she thought of Mark, brilliant, flawed, misguided Mark, lying dead in some hotel room. She thought of Lily, innocently skipping stones just minutes ago, unaware that her world was about to shatter once again. In that moment, Laura made a decision. For Mark's memory, for Lily's future, for her own peace of mind, she would see this through to the end. What do you need me to do? She asked, her voice stronger than she felt. As the agents began to outline their plan, Laura felt a strange calm settle over her. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and more potential betrayals. But for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt a sense of purpose. Whatever the truth was, whatever conspiracies lay behind Mark's death and Global Tech's secrets, Laura would uncover it all. Not just for justice, but for answers, for closure, for a chance to rebuild her life and Lily's from the ashes of Mark's lies. Little did Laura know, as she sat in that lakeside cabin listening to the FBI agents, that her journey into the heart of the conspiracy was only just beginning. The revelations to come would test her in ways she could never have imagined, forcing her to question everything she thought she knew about herself, her marriage, and the very nature of truth itself. The following days blurred into a whirlwind of activity as Laura found herself thrust into the center of a complex investigation. Agent Thompson and Agent Rivera had set up a makeshift command center in Kate's cabin, transforming the quaint lakeside retreat into a hub of covert operations. Laura's mind raced as she sifted through years of memories, searching for any clue Mark might have left behind. Every conversation, every odd behavior, every unexplained absence was now suspect. The weight of her task was overwhelming, but the alternative, letting Mark's killers go free, was unthinkable. One afternoon, as Laura pored over old financial records, a memory surfaced. The lake house, she murmured, causing Agent Thompson to look up sharply. What lake house, Mrs. Pearson? Laura's heart raced as she explained. About a year ago, Mark mentioned wanting to buy a small property up north. He said it was for weekend getaways, but he never took us there. I'd almost forgotten about it. The agents exchanged meaningful glances. Do you have any idea where this property might be? Agent Rivera asked urgently. Laura shook her head, feeling a familiar pang of frustration at all the secrets Mark had kept. But then another memory struck her. Wait, there was a brochure. I remember seeing it on his desk. The logo had a pine tree and Eagle Lake. That was it. Eagle Lake. Within hours, a team was dispatched to Eagle Lake. Laura insisted on going, despite the agent's reservations. She needed to see for herself, to understand the extent of Mark's deceptions. As they approached the small, nondescript cabin nestled among the pines, Laura felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool Michigan air. This place, this secret hideaway, represented everything Mark had kept from her and Lily. The interior of the cabin was sparse, almost unlived in. But as the agents began their methodical search, Laura's eyes were drawn to a painting on the wall, a serene landscape of the lake at sunset. Something about it nagged at her. Acting on instinct, Laura gently removed the painting from the wall. There, hidden behind it, was a safe. "Agents!" she called out, her voice trembling. "I think I found something." As Agent Thompson worked to crack the safe, Laura's mind reeled. What secrets lay hidden inside? What truths or lies was she about to uncover? The safe swung open with a soft click, revealing a laptop, several USB drives, and a thick manila envelope. Laura's breath caught in her throat as Agent Rivera carefully extracted the contents. "Mrs. Pearson," Agent Thompson said gravely, "I think you've just blown this case wide open." Back at Kate's cabin, the agents worked tirelessly to decrypt the files on the laptop and USB drives. Laura paced anxiously, torn between wanting to know everything and fearing what she might learn. It was well past midnight when Agent Rivera emerged from the makeshift command center, her face a mix of shock and grim determination. "Laura," she said, using her first name for the first time, "you need to see this." The laptop screen flickered to life, displaying a complex web of transactions, coded messages, and surveillance photos. At the center of it all was a name that made Laura's blood run cold. Charles Holloway, CEO of Global Tech Industries. "Your husband," Agent Thompson explained softly, "was gathering evidence of a massive conspiracy, money laundering, weapons dealing, political blackmail, all orchestrated by Holloway and his inner circle at Global Tech." Laura stared at the screen, her world tilting on its axis once again. "But why didn't Mark come to you? To the real FBI?" The agents exchanged a look that sent a shiver down Laura's spine. "Because," Agent Rivera said carefully, "he discovered that the corruption went beyond Global Tech. There are high-level government officials involved, Mrs. Pearson. People who could bury any official investigation." The implications were staggering. Mark hadn't just been trying to protect her and Lily from a corrupt corporation. He'd been taking on a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of power. As the full scope of the situation dawned on her, Laura felt a surge of emotions, grief for the husband she'd never truly known, pride in his bravery, and a burning desire to see his work completed. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Agent Thompson leaned forward, his expression grave. "Now, Mrs. Pearson, we move carefully. The evidence your husband gathered could bring down some very powerful people. But it also puts you and Lily in incredible danger." Laura thought of her daughter, sleeping peacefully upstairs, blissfully unaware of the web of deceit and danger surrounding them. She thought of Mark, who had given his life to expose this conspiracy. In that moment, she made a decision that would alter the course of her life forever. "Tell me what I need to do," she said, her voice filled with a determination she didn't know she possessed. "Whatever it takes, we're going to finish what Mark started." As the agents began outlining their plan, Laura felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time since this nightmare began, she had a clear purpose. She would unravel this conspiracy, expose the truth, and ensure that Mark's sacrifice wasn't in vain. And in doing so, perhaps she would finally uncover the full truth about the man she had loved, the man she thought she had known. Little did Laura know, as dawn broke over the lake, that her journey into the heart of this vast conspiracy was only just beginning. The revelations to come would test her in ways she could never have imagined, forcing her to confront not just external enemies, but her own capacity for courage, deception, and sacrifice. The game was afoot, and Laura Pearson, widow, mother, and now reluctant spy, was about to become its most crucial player. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Kate's cabin as Laura sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. Her mind raced, replaying the events of the past few days on an endless loop. The weight of her new reality pressed down on her, making even the simple act of breathing feel like a monumental effort. Agent Thompson entered the kitchen, his face etched with concern. Mrs. Pearson, we need to discuss our next steps. Are you ready? Laura nodded, steeling herself. What's the plan? We need to get you and Lily to a safe house, he explained. From there, we'll need your help to decrypt some of the files we couldn't access on Mark's laptop. We believe he may have used personal information as encryption keys. A lump formed in Laura's throat at the mention of Mark's name. Despite everything, the pain of his loss was still raw. And then what? Agent Rivera joined them, her voice low and urgent. Then we start unraveling this conspiracy, thread by thread. But Mrs. Pearson, you need to understand the risks. Once we start pulling on these threads, there's no going back. The people involved, they're powerful, ruthless. They won't hesitate to dash, to kill. Laura interrupted, her voice surprisingly steady. Like they killed Mark? The agents exchanged a grim look. Yes, Thompson confirmed. Exactly like that. Laura took a deep breath, thinking of Lily sleeping upstairs. How do I explain this to my daughter? How do I uproot her life again? Rivera's expression softened. We can help with that. We have child psychologists who specialize in these situations. But Mrs. Pearson, Laura, you need to be prepared. This mission could take months, even years. Your lives will never be the same. The gravity of the situation crashed over Laura like a tidal wave. She thought of her home in Chicago, her friends, Lily's school. All of it gone, perhaps forever. But then she thought of Mark, of the risks he had taken to expose this conspiracy. Could she do any less? Okay, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm in, but I have one condition. The agents leaned in, listening intently. I want to be trained, Laura declared, a fire igniting in her eyes. If I'm going to be part of this, I want to be able to protect myself and Lily. I won't be a passive player in this game. Thompson and Rivera exchanged surprised glances. Mrs. Pearson, Thompson began cautiously. What you're asking? It's not standard procedure. Neither is any of this, Laura shot back. You need me. I need to be prepared. It's non-negotiable. After a moment of tense silence, Rivera nodded. We can arrange something. Basic self-defense, weapons training, counter-surveillance techniques. But you have to understand, this isn't a movie. The danger is real. I understand, Laura said, her resolve strengthening with each passing moment. When do we start? The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Laura and Lily were moved to a nondescript house in a small town in Vermont, their identities carefully crafted to blend into the community. Lily, told they were in witness protection due to Mark's work, adapted with a resilience that both broke Laura's heart and filled her with pride. During the day, while Lily attended a local school under close surveillance, Laura threw herself into her training. She learned to shoot, to fight, to spot a tail, to create and crack codes. Her body ached, her mind reeled, but she pushed through, driven by a determination she never knew she possessed. At night, she pored over Mark's files, her intimate knowledge of their life together proving invaluable in decrypting hidden messages. Slowly, painfully, the full scope of the conspiracy began to take shape. It was during one of these late-night sessions, nearly a month into their new life, that Laura made a breakthrough that would change everything. Agent Thompson, she called out, her voice tight with excitement and fear. I think I found something. The agent rushed in, looking over her shoulder at the laptop screen. What is it? Laura pointed to a series of transactions she'd uncovered. Look at these. They're not just money laundering. It's a slush fund for political bribes, blackmail payments, God knows what else. And look who's authorizing them. Thompson's sharp intake of breath told Laura she was right. The name on the screen was one they both recognized, Senator William Hartley, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. This goes higher than we thought, Thompson muttered, his face pale in the glow of the laptop screen. Laura nodded, a chill running down her spine. Mark knew. He knew how deep this went. That's why he couldn't trust anyone. As the implications of her discovery sank in, Laura felt a strange mix of emotions wash over her. Pride in Mark's bravery, anger at the scope of the corruption, fear for what lay ahead. But underlying it all was a steely determination. "What's our next move?" she asked, her voice steady and resolute. Thompson met her gaze, a newfound respect in his eyes. "Now, Mrs. Pearson, we go on the offensive. Are you ready?" Laura thought of Mark, of Lily, of the life they'd lost and the future they were fighting for. She nodded, her jaw set with determination. "I'm ready," she said, knowing that with those two words, she was stepping irrevocably into a world of shadows and secrets, of danger and deception. But she was no longer just Laura Pearson, grieving widow. She was a woman on a mission, determined to uncover the truth and bring down those who had shattered her world. As dawn broke over their safe house, Laura steeled herself for the challenges ahead. The game had changed, the stakes raised. But she was no longer a pawn. She was a player, ready to take on the corrupt forces that had underestimated her. Little did she know, her journey into the heart of the conspiracy was about to take a turn that would test her resolve, her loyalty, and her very sense of self in ways she could never have imagined. Thank you for listening until the end. Share your opinion about the story in the comments and let us know which character you liked the most. If this story touched you and you want to hear more, click on the next story appearing on your screen. Leave a like and subscribe to our channel so we can build a great community of people who share emotional stories together. Until the next story.